This is MRC Uncensored. I'm Dan Schneider. Joining me today is a fearless journalist who has spent her entire professional career in war zones and along the border in dangerous places. Truly, she is one of the hardest working journalists I know, and without fear. Sara, how long have you spent in Afghanistan in war zones and getting shot at?
I think I could say I actually started when I was covering the U.S.-Mexico border, Dan. So I would go all the way back. I found stories like as far back as 2003, 2004, being out on the U.S.-Mexico border, which before going to Afghanistan, I got to tell you, that was rough. I was there during Vicente Fox when the wars were escalating between Sinaloa and Los Zetas cartel, the Juarez cartels. And I sometimes look back and think, like, what was that young reporter doing back then? I'm going to shake her up, but I'm still doing it. I mean, I believed in telling the stories and informing the American people and letting them know that, look, we have a real significant threat and it's right on our border. And then, of course, I ended up, covering those stories actually led me to Afghanistan.
Sara, let me jump in here because I want to make sure people understand there are lots of people who will cover the border, cover Afghanistan, from a safe zone. They may even be in country, but they're going to be holed up in some U.S. headquarters. That's not you. You actually go deep into enemy territory. You've hung out with platoons in the middle of nowhere being shot at. You are a genuine war correspondent.
Yeah, well, I believed that it was, my job to tell the American people what was actually happening on the ground. And I don't knock other reporters who want to, go and, anywhere in the war zone is a dangerous place. But I believed it was important to tell the stories about the soldiers and to tell their families what was happening on the ground to them. That was my job. And I took it seriously enough. I remember going out to combat outposts along the Pakistan border with Afghanistan and, the dangerous assignments, yes, that I had. And we see now what has happened to our ally in Israel, a great ally. It is just horrific. I last night even had a hard time going to sleep since the attack on October 7th in Israel, because I see all these beautiful, innocent people and how they were slaughtered. And then I've been looking at the videos and trying to repost as much as I can of the children that were taken hostage or the people that were taken hostage. And I did go out on the front lines, Dan. I'm going to go back to that because I know we'll get to Israel. But I did that because I believed, and I still believe that the American people deserve the truth.
Yeah, well,
and
Sara,
they deserve as much information as possible to make the right decisions at the ballot box.
This is why I'm wanting to focus on the fact that you actually go into the danger zone, whether it's in drug-infested places where cartels in South America, Central America are doing things, or whether it's in Afghanistan or Pakistan, because you're getting actual news. You're doing actual reporting, making sure Americans know what's really going on. But when you look at what ABC and NBC and CBS are doing, they're relying on the Hamas talking points. Things like the hospital story where all these outlets initially blamed Israel for it and used Hamas's talking points about the number of alleged casualties. What is going on with the media today? Why are they getting it so wrong in Israel?
Because they have an ideology that they have bought into. They have bought into a narrative, and they don't want to face reality, and they won't. They continue to spew lies and propaganda to our young Americans who are susceptible to this. I was kind of stunned, Dan, when I read a story, and I wish I could remember the exact statistics, but that there was a good majority of young Americans that hadn't even heard the word Holocaust. Like, it's not being taught correctly in our universities and in our school systems, that the genocide that happened to the Jewish people during World War II, or the pogroms, that have happened in the world, that they are being taught, by professors who have bought into a Marxist leftist rhetoric, and these are the same people that are, by the way, in charge of our media outlets and our mainstream so-called media outlets. I was retweeting some information that some great journalists had done in Israel and in other parts of the United States, where they were focusing in on the pictures and the videos that had come off the attacks by Hamas, those horrific attacks on October 7th at the kibbutzes and the other communities in Israel. And they were pointing out that the video footage that was being used by AP, by CNN, and by others was actual video footage taken by freelance journalists that hang out with Hamas leadership, that were actually invited by Hamas on this horror of an attack, this terrorist attack. And I'm thinking to myself, and I tweeted back at CNN and ABC and AP and all of them, I'm like, what is your policy on working with terrorists?
Well, so
do you have a policy?
AP, CNN, New York Times, and Reuters have these photojournalists that were embedded with Hamas. And I want to be very clear about this. These photojournalists were embedded with the Hamas terrorists before the attack began. They knew that the attack was going to commence. They did not warn anybody that the attack was going to commence. Sarah, I'm telling you, as a lawyer, I think we're going to see big lawsuits by the families of the murdered victims and the injured victims against AP, CNN, New York Times, and Reuters at a minimum. For paying their own photojournalists kept silent about what was about to happen.
I certainly hope so. I hope every single family that is connected and has lost a loved one, or has a loved one that has been taken, or who was harmed in any way, shape, or form, or had to flee their home, or has family in the United States, I hope there are multiple lawsuits across the board targeting these news agencies. I got to tell you, I worked in Afghanistan. I worked in Pakistan. I have sources in those regions of the world. Those sources have been fully vetted to my best of my capability before I even use anything from them. I am absolutely certain, to the best of my capability, that those sources do not mean harm to either Americans or to their own people. These are good people that I work with. And it's difficult. Granted, it's difficult when you're dealing with foreign freelance reporters and photographers. But when you have video footage that is coming from a freelance photographer who was embedded with Hamas on one of the most barbaric attacks in modern history against the state of Israel and innocent human beings, let's just begin by, and I'm having a hard time with this, Dan, and you know this. You know I'm having a hard time. I've covered the war. I've seen the horrors of war. I've seen blood on the battlefields. My God, I hope I never see that again. My husband was blinded in Afghanistan. I have people that I'm still trying to get out of Afghanistan. I spend my whole life has been consumed by this. But when I think of those poor innocent babies and those children and those women and those men that were sitting at home just minding their own business and living their lives, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, people are charging through their doors, they're pointing guns at them, they're ripping them apart, they're throwing a baby in an oven, for crying out loud. They're doing things that are so inhuman that can only be described as demonic. And to know that our news agencies used footage by people that could have stopped this attack, it's unacceptable to me. It's wrong, and it has to be stopped.
They're complicit in it, but let's expand this also to social media, the big tech platforms, because one of the places where you've done work is in Hong Kong. And here at the Media Research Center, we have CensorTrack, where we've got over 6,000 documented cases of big tech censorship, and that includes things that you have done and said. For example, YouTube demonetized you when you had a video talking about the great patriot Andy Chan, who was fighting for the freedom of Hong Kongers against the Chinese Communist Party, and YouTube demonetized you.
They
Google's...
demonetized me, and they never gave it back. They never let me grow. I've stayed at 32,000 YouTubers since that day. They've never allowed me to grow. They've never given me my freedom back on YouTube. And Andy Chan, who you know, is somebody that we all love and respect, and somebody who bravery doesn't even begin to describe what he was up against and what he is still up against. And it's unbelievable to me that we live in a global world where lies are becoming the norm, and those that are seeking the truth have to fight against a wall of lies. I don't even think science fiction has even expected this to happen this way. I mean, we talk about the memory hole in 1984, and it is similar to that, but in a different way. It's almost as if we have given our freedoms and our liberties up purposefully. We've seen people in positions of power say, here, take it away from us. And I'm grateful, for people like Elon Musk who've come in and have taken over Twitter, and now it's X. But I'm also still concerned because we've still seen issues with these platforms. We've seen nations like China and their investments in these type of platforms, and what that may mean in the future. I don't know. But poor Andy Chan, I'm almost scared to talk about him because I'm afraid that if I say anything about Andy, that the Chinese government is going to do something to harm him.
Well, and then Jimmy Lai has now been sitting in prison for over 1,000 days. He just reached the 1,000-day mark. Those are the two greatest patriots who were fighting for freedom in Hong Kong. And I would say that Jimmy Lai is the greatest living patriot on the planet. This is a man who earned billions of dollars, and he stood for freedom, knowing that the Chinese Communist Party was going to come after him for doing it. What a great man.
What an amazing man. And that is the person that we should all be fighting for. We should be fighting for his freedom. We should be standing up to the Chinese government. We should have a government that is responsible enough to stand on principle, and we don't anymore. And that's the tragedy here. In the United States, we have a beautiful constitution, and we had founding fathers that could foresee the horrors of what happens when the government is in full power over its people. I was, talking about this earlier today to somebody. Our founding fathers understood that the power must rest with the people, that the people must be in charge, and that the government works for them. It's not the other way around. And we see now what has happened when our government has seized power, because we've lost in the United States those basic principles that made us the envy of the world. And I'm terrified. I'm terrified of where the trajectory of where we're headed. But I still believe in the principles that guide us. And I think that I still believe that there's more of us than there are of them, and that we just have to be brave enough to stand up and say no more. We have to be, and take the example of Lai. We have to stand up like him and say no more. And sometimes that comes with great sacrifice, but there's no other way around it if we want to save this nation, and we want to save what we believe is liberty and freedom and human dignity. Well,
Sara, you're going to be on our cruise a year from now.
I'm so excited.
And Marty's going to be with us, right?
Yes, Marty's going to be with us on the cruise post-election. I'm very excited. It's going to be, I know it's going to be a celebration. If not, where are we going to cruise to?
Well, so MRCcruise.com for people who want to know more about that. And Sara, your Twitter handle is @Sara Carter DC. It's
Yes.
indispensable if you really want to know what's going on. And then your website is saracarter.com, right?
That is correct. That is correct. SaraACarter.com. And by the way, I am on my Twitter handle. It's nobody else. It's me. As obvious by my mistakes and my re-editing when I'm tweeting late at night. I probably shouldn't be doing that, but I do respond to people who contact me, and I can debate, and I am not afraid of hearing your opinions. So I'm right there, and it's important to me too. I like to hear what you have to say, the audience. You know that, Dan. I love that, and I want to be able to focus on the stories that are most important to the audience and to those that are reading the stories on my site.
Well, Sara, you are a great champion for the First Amendment. You've been a champion for the First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of the press for a long time. You have stood up against literal terrorists. You've put your life on the line for our country. I cannot tell you how pleased I am that you've joined us today. Thank you so much, and keep up the great work.
Thank you so much, Dan.